Good morning. Welcome to this edition of the Weather Desk. I'm 13 News Now meteorologist Craig Moeller, and I'm broadcasting from our studios in Southeast Virginia, specifically Norfolk, Virginia, right at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. It's time for the Weather Desk, and this is the show. You found it, where we tackle today's top weather headlines. And we've really got some interesting stuff to share with you today. I'm very, very excited about it. So let's go ahead and take a look at our weather headlines. And we're going to start off by taking a look at a conversation I had with the National Hurricane Center, a special interview. I actually did this yesterday, but I caught up with Mike Brennan, one of the meteorologists down there, talking about some of the things, some of the new products they're using, some of the different ways that we are going to communicate threats during the hurricane season, and just really good stuff. Kind of the future with the Hurricane Center, where it's headed with their forecast, and the important information that we share. So a lot coming up on the hurricane, or from the Hurricane Center on the upcoming hurricane season. Hard to believe, here we are now, mid-April, heading towards the end of April. And that hurricane season just around the corner, won't be too much longer. I also got a brand new drought monitor. You know, it comes in every Thursday morning at 8:30 Eastern. So we've got the updated drought figures from across the country. We'll focus on Hampton Roads in one particular part of the country where they are facing extreme fire danger today. I'll show you which area is driest and has the potential for the greater winds and the fire danger that's out there. And then this last topic, I think this is one that will certainly catch a lot of attention from folks. Signs of life from a distant planet? Ooh, we'll talk about this. ABC did a great package on this recent discovery and why some scientists believe this could be the strongest indication of life from another planet. Stay tuned. That'll be coming up. We're going to start off, though, talking about the hurricane season. And I wanted to begin, before we get into that interview, looking back on the 2024 season. You can see we started off in June with Alberto, and we had Beryl, and we were thinking, wow, is this going to be a busy season? I mean, we had 3 named systems all before the end of June. And then there was this long break where there was nothing. And if you remember last year, if you really follow the hurricane coverage in the season and how things play out, we were talking about record warmth in the Atlantic Basin and the fact that we were in a La Nina or trending towards La Nina. We were concerned that it was going to be a very active period. You typically would see these things coming together to produce really high activity, and through July and into early August, we had nothing. Once that Beryl dissipated, and again, that was kind of hanging around for quite a while, but once that went away, there was no new development for weeks and weeks. And we thought, what happened to the hurricane season? We got into August with Debbie and Ernesto, and then things really started to ramp up as we worked later in September. We saw Helene, and you remember what Helene did to the southeast U.S., and think about Asheville and all of the flooding. Later, we got into October, and Milton slammed into Florida. So there were some big storms and some very active storms as that last part of the season, September into October, November, picked up. We hit our numbers, but we did have that long lull of quiet activity during the early to middle part of the season last year. So what lies ahead? Well, as I mentioned, I did catch up with the National Hurricane Center with this extended, kind of a little bit longer format here interview. But I think if you pay attention to it and if you're interested in the hurricane season, you're going to like this. Here's Mike Brennan from the National Hurricane Center. Well, I'm really excited to be joined right now with Mike Brennan, a meteorologist with the National Hurricane Center. Mike, let's talk about some of the things that are going on from NHC for the upcoming hurricane season.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be with you. So, yeah, we're not too far away from the start of the 2025 hurricane season. So the main message, you know, as we head into this time of year is a big focus on preparedness, understanding what your risk is. And there in, Tidewater, Virginia, there's a lot of vulnerability to hurricanes from coastal flooding and storm surge to wind to heavy rainfall, tornadoes. Those are all in play for that region. In terms of things that are going to be a little different here at the Hurricane Center, we have our experimental cone graphic that's going to continue to be available in 2025. We introduced this in the 2024 hurricane season. It shows the inland extent of the tropical storm and hurricane watches and warnings. This is an example from Hurricane Milton last year, where we had watches and warnings up for almost the entire state of Florida. Similarly for Helene. So if we had a storm threatening the mid-Atlantic coast, northeastern North Carolina, you would see these broad areas painted over top of the cone itself to show you what the risk is from those wind hazards with those tropical storm or hurricane watches and warnings. So this graphic will continue to be available this hurricane season on our website at hurricanes.gov.
It seems like it's a subtle difference, but it really does help us tell the story. And I assume the feedback that you got at the Hurricane Center must have been very positive with this, kind of highlighting some of these inward or inland extent of some of these impacts.
Yeah, it really was. And if you go back and you look at an example for Hurricane Helene last year, too, you can again see for a storm that moved very quickly inland, the entire portions of multiple states under those watches and warnings. So it's a really easy way to show that risk from those substantial wind threats that can travel very, very far inland. And even for a storm affecting, southeastern Virginia, northeast North Carolina, it could be a storm that makes landfall along the Gulf Coast of Florida or farther south in the Carolinas. Maybe not a direct landfall, but could still bring substantial impacts. No,
in fact, most of the ones that do have the impacts to our area come in at least cutting across North Carolina, if not coming up through the Gulf, and then kind of the remnants finding their way to Hampton Roads. So that's an excellent point. I think one of the things we have as a challenge, Mike, and you may face the same thing down there, how do we best and most clearly explain some of these threats to folks? We still have some folks here in coastal Virginia. They generally heed advice like get out or get off the coast. But there are still some challenges in really driving home what these big threats are.
Yeah, especially in the Hampton Roads area, storm surge is a tremendous threat. You've got a metro area that's surrounded by water, the Chesapeake Bay, the Atlantic coast. And so there's a lot of water around, and that is one of the bigger threats. And, storm surge, we try to communicate the risk of that with the storm surge watch and warning, where we are able to highlight those areas that are at risk of life-threatening inundation from storm surge. And that risk generally starts when we get to about 3 or 4 feet of inundation above ground level. So you can see, some people here on the graphic give an idea of how tall they are, but you get to 3 or 4 feet, that's over the heads of most kids. It's going to be about waist deep water on most adults. And if you get to inundation, 5 or 6 feet above ground level, you're talking about over the tops of most people's heads. I'm 6 feet tall, so 6 feet of inundation is going to be up at the top of my head. And that's really not an environment you want to stay in. And it's important to remind people that storm surge is generally what drives most evacuation orders from local government officials in tropical storms and hurricanes. Those are the areas you need to leave so that you can stay away from that storm surge risk. And it's important to remind people you don't always have to drive 100 or 200 miles to get out of that storm surge risk area. You might only have to drive 10 or 20 miles to a safe place outside of that storm surge evacuation zone.
Yeah, it's all about the elevation, no doubt. Now, we're going to go just a little bit into the weeds here. A lot of times when we communicate water levels, we base it on the average of the lower low tides, what we call mean lower low water. Going to this inundation communication, and again, we're embracing it because the Hurricane Center is now using this and we want to stay consistent as best we can. But is there a way to understand how, you say 3 feet of inundation, is that at average sea level, above average sea level, or how do you guys, what is the best way for us to communicate it to our audience?
Yeah, when we talk about inundation and when you look at, say, the storm surge inundation graphic or the potential storm surge flooding graphic, that's calculated above ground level at that particular location. So when we talk about inundation here, if you're looking at a map where your home is and it says 3 to 6 feet, that means at that location, the water could be 3 to 6 feet above the ground level at that particular point. So it allows us to better convey what the inundation risk above ground level is over a much broader area rather than tying it to a a tide level at a particular tide gauge, which is only representative of a point.
No, very good information there. Of course, a lot of the folks historically that deal with this kind of understand where they are relative to those tide gauges, but you make a great point. So no arguments here. Now, Mike, while I have you, I got to ask you about the upcoming hurricane season. You know, we talked about the ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, and the fact that we're kind of going back to a neutral phase, what we call La Nada. That takes a little bit of the predictability. It can change things up a little bit in terms of historically what we've seen. What's the current thinking from the Hurricane Center on what kind of a season may be upcoming?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, El Nino, La Nina are sort of the more predictable parts of what a seasonal or a hurricane outlook looks like in the Atlantic. And when neither of them is present, it does inject a little more uncertainty. Our official hurricane forecast for the season from NOAA doesn't come out until later in May, so I can't speak to any details. But, you know, we have been in a pretty active period over the last 20 to 30 years in the Atlantic. And just since 2017, we've had 25 hurricane landfalls in the United States, 5 of them last year. Now, most of those hurricane landfalls have been along the Gulf Coast, but we have seen some on the East Coast as well, the East Coast of Florida up into the Carolinas. So the main message for people is you have to prepare every season, regardless of what any seasonal forecast says. It could be a quiet season overall, but if we have 4 or 5 storms that make landfall in the United States along the East Coast, it's going to feel like a busy season. And in a place where you have as much risk as you do in the Hampton Roads area, southeastern Virginia, northeastern North Carolina, that's an area where you have to be ready every year, starting June all the way through October and November.
Yeah, our advice year after year is always be prepared. It only takes one to hit your area to make it the worst season on record. So no doubt about that. I'm interested to know also, while I have you, and this is great, I really appreciate your time. Last year, we had that freakishly warm Atlantic basin and the MDR, record warmth early in the season. It was like what we might typically expect to find in August, during the peak of the Cape Verde season. This year, still warm, maybe not quite as warm. Did you guys as forecasters collectively go, wow, we had that period where there just wasn't much development in spite of that warmth? Were you surprised last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody remembers it got really quiet in the Atlantic through August and even into, portions of early September. But we did have, Hurricane Beryl that formed out over the main development region in late June, which is not the area you would expect to see in a typical season. But you're right, because of those very warm waters, we had Beryl form and become a Category 4 and then Category 5 hurricane in the Caribbean in early July, which was unprecedented in terms of the formation date. But yeah, you're right. We had that sort of pause mid-season, but then things got really busy again in September and October. And the challenge with that is when you start to get busy that time of year, the activity shifts back over to the western part of the basin, where you're going to get that development a lot closer to the United States and the Gulf, the Caribbean, and the Bahamas. And that makes it much more likely that you're going to have those storms start to affect land compared to storms that might form out of the main development region and then have some chance to recurve away from land.
Yeah, good points. Good points. One thing, you guys have done an amazing job really with the forecasting accuracy and the tracks. It has been, as long as I've been doing this, and again, I mentioned before, I started back in '89, and I've had a hand in hurricane forecasting from a broadcast standpoint for decades now. But that intensity can still be somewhat of a challenge. Last second fluctuations. How do you guys feel about that? How are you feeling about all of the advancements? Again, the Hurricane Center does a remarkable job. Are you seeing, more improvements in the modeling? Are you feeling good about it? Where are we with this?
Yeah, we've come a long way in forecasting intensity. If you remember, you've been around in the first 20 years of your career, intensity forecasting accuracy for hurricanes really hadn't changed very much, all the way from the late 1980s into the 2000s. It was kind of just steady state. We didn't make a lot of progress. But since that time, we've cut our average intensity forecast errors about in half. We've started to get more data from the hurricane hunters aircraft into the models, and that's improved their forecast. We've started to make more aggressive forecasts of rapid intensification now. Our average error when rapid intensification occurs is about half of what it was even just 10 or 15 years ago. So when you have these storms that develop close to home, like a Helene, like a Milton, where they are going to rapidly intensify, now we're making a lot more aggressive forecasts than we used to. We're not getting them exactly right. A lot of times the storms get even a little stronger than we forecast, or the timing is off, but we're at least able to sort of anticipate now when that rapid intensification can occur. We still have a long way to go, but we have made a lot of progress there.
Mike, it's been amazing again, and you and your colleagues do a tremendous job. Last question, looking forward, is there anything that gets you really excited about the future of hurricane research or forecasting and how we're handling this as a partnership and as a community, just informing our public?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always things coming in the pipeline, new observation tools. We've got small UASs or drones that we're now flying out of the Hurricane Hunter aircraft down near the ocean surface, collecting data where we really haven't ever been able to collect data before, because you can't fly a crewed aircraft down at 100 feet above the ocean surface. New ways to observe storms from space. We have a new GOES satellite that is now operational over the over the Atlantic and eastern U.S. this year. So we're seeing details. We're getting data that we never really had visibility on before. And so it's a long process to take that research and transition it into something that we use as an operational tool here. We're looking at AI technology in terms of modeling and observations that we're starting to incorporate into our forecast process here as well. So there's a lot of exciting developments that are in the pipeline that working towards operations.
Mike, great stuff. Thank you so much for your time, and thank everybody there at the Hurricane Center. Again, as a user, as somebody that takes all of these forecast updates and then conveys that to the public, the work you're doing is significant, and it really helps us out. So thank you guys, and thank everybody else you work with there.
Thanks so much.
All right, so we'll start off with a look at the upcoming Atlantic, kind of looking historically at when we see activity picking up, all right? So these are storms and occurrences between 1944 and 2020. You can see the start of the hurricane season, traditionally June 1, and it runs through November 30th. There can and sometimes are some storms that develop outside of the typical season. We certainly can have systems form, especially with warm water temperatures, sea surface temperatures, which we already have down across parts of the Atlantic tropical basin. But we could get some development in May. So this is a great time, again, to think about things like your insurance. Double check on that. I will tell you, I mistakenly let my own flood insurance lapse, and I've since got it reinstated. Again, we live in a beautiful place here in Hampton Roads, but I'm not taking any chances. If we were to get a tropical system come in close to the bay, we would have some big flooding issues here in Hampton Roads. You don't want to wait until a storm is out there. It's 10 days out or 5 days out or whatever, and I'm going to try to get my insurance. The flood insurance program, it takes some time for that flood insurance to kick in. So you want to do it now before we're into the season, and it's too late if you do need that insurance. So think about that. And again, put together a family plan, all those safety tips. We've got a tremendous amount of tropical information available at our 13 News Now digital platform, certainly our website, but we'll have a lot more information and little short stories that are very easy to watch. You take a minute covering a variety of different topics. They're going to be available through our 13 News Now digital platform. So you definitely want to check in on that. And then we'll look for the season again for the Atlantic. The peak of the season is right around the 10th of September. And it's always interesting. Again, it's a great place to live here in the mid-Atlantic coast. And we will certainly have any tropical development covered as it comes down the line. But hopefully we get through in good shape again. You still want to have a plan in place. Very important stuff. All right, as we take a look at the normals, and again, that official NOAA forecast coming out, a lot of the forecasters just starting to kind of hint at what their thinking is. But when you look at the averages, and these are the averages from 1991 to 2020, we typically have 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. So we'll see. Again, those forecasts will be coming out in the coming weeks, and we'll certainly pass them along for you here at 13 News Now. Now, as we take a look at the 2025 names, too early to say how many of these will go through, but you can see the list that the World Meteorological Organization has put out there. Andrea, the first name, remember they go boy, girl, all the way down through the list. And our list of primary names then goes to Barry, Chantal, Dexter, Aaron, Fernand, Gabrielle, Umberto, Imelda, Jerry, Karen, Lorenzo, Melissa, Nestor. There's Olga, Pablo, Rebecca, Sebastian, Tanya, Van, and Wendy. So those are the names for the 2025 season. And again, sometimes we burn through a bunch. Then there's a long lull like we had last year. Sometimes we do a whole bunch and they just keep rolling. And we could go into the auxiliary list as well. There's a second list of names that if we burn through all of these, we would go into them. But again, we'll see. Hopefully the numbers this year may be down a little bit. As I mentioned, we are in that neutral phase of the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So we don't have a real clear indication whether we should expect more or less activity than what is typical. But at this point, we're still playing with water temperatures, sea surface temperatures that are above average, and it has been a very active pattern we've been in for quite a while. So we'll see how things play out this year. All right, here's that updated drought monitor just released at 9 o'clock this morning. And there are still areas with extreme to exceptional drought in the southwest U.S., also some dry areas across the north central U.S. It looks like some of the areas that were exceptionally dry with that exceptional drought may have pared down a little bit from the previous amounts. I wanted to show you, though, Arizona and specifically New Mexico. While they're in severe to extreme drought across much of New Mexico, this is an area of concern right now for gusty winds and for very dry air. So we're going to come back to that when we take a look at the fire danger in a moment. For those of you watching from Hampton Roads, and a lot of folks are here watching this live feed and tuning in and checking back with 13 News Now, I wanted to give you our specific information. Eastern Shore's in good shape. Northern Neck, the Middle Peninsula, all in good shape. Southside Hampton Roads in the metro area good. But you get to the southern tier of the south side. We're talking southern Virginia Beach, areas in Chesapeake, down around Hickory, down towards St. Bride's, back through the Dismal Swamp and the southeast corner of the city of Suffolk into northeast North Carolina. Here we have exceptional dry. And then once you get down around the Albemarle Sound, we're still at moderate drought. So not a lot of change from the previous week, but this is the latest, and I wanted to make sure all of our viewers right here in Hampton Roads understood that. That's the very latest on the drought monitor. All right, we're going to come back to the situation nationally and what's going on. And I'll put the winds on here. You can see there's a big kind of broad clockwise circulation here in the northern hemisphere. That means high pressure right here. So that's going on. We have a little convective complex that was kind of working out ahead of this cold front, this push in an area of low pressure off to the north. We also have a frontal boundary which drapes back across Utah and back into California. With high pressure down over Mexico, we do have the southwest winds, and the winds have been gusty at times through portions of New Mexico. So high wind warnings are out for these areas shaded in this pinkish color, the tan areas under wind advisory. As we take a closer look with the wind warnings, we also have red flag warnings. So gusts, say 55 to 65 miles per hour. In some areas, you might even see a little bit more, anywhere from New Mexico back up into the Texas Panhandle, the Oklahoma Panhandle, West Kansas. Some gusty winds there, and the relative humidity 5 to 10%. That's why we have this combination with the very extreme fire danger. Red flag warnings are up, but folks, especially here through New Mexico, need to be prepared and obviously limit all outdoor burning. That's the one part of the country that we're most concerned with. Now, as we take a look here in the eastern U.S., it is a quiet day. We've got a lot of sunshine, and you might be thinking about the upcoming weekend. We are heading into a holiday weekend, and maybe you're looking for some outdoor family fun. Well, luckily, our area has a bunch of places you can do some strawberry picking, and we have phenomenal strawberries here in Hampton Roads. Hickory Ridge Farms in Chesapeake opened up on April 12th. Brookdale Farms, also in Chesapeake, just updated their Facebook to say that strawberry picking is coming soon. We checked some places in Virginia Beach. Henley Farms opened up just this week, just in time for Saturday's 80-degree temperatures. And Vaughn Farms will be opening tomorrow from 10 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Here's a list of some of the farms we talked about. Some of the locations also have other fun activities to do outside of strawberry picking. So be sure to go to their websites and you'll want to check it out. Lots of information available there. And strawberries, such a big part of our farming here in the area. there's always that Pungo Strawberry Festival for many years, and they've had the last few years, they've had different reasons for putting it off. There have been some weather and some other things. But again, strawberry picking time, it's coming up, and you have those locations we just shared. All right, let's take a look at something here going into the weekend. You'll notice the temperatures will be warming up. 77 on Friday, 85 on Saturday. So again, a lot of great outdoor activities over the Easter weekend you might want to take advantage of here in Hampton Roads. Next topic, we turn our attention to space and the fact that we may not be alone after all. Now to a new possible sign of life in a galaxy, well, another part of the galaxy. It's a distant planet far, far away. Astronomers studying a massive planet more than 100 light years from Earth have come across a major hint showing we may not be alone in the universe, and they're calling the find a revolutionary moment. Here's ABC's Rhiannon Alley.
It could be a major discovery in the search for extraterrestrial life.
This moment in history of science will be viewed as a paradigm shift in our search for life.
Using the James Webb Telescope, scientists say they have detected unusual gases in the atmosphere of a faraway planet, gases which, here on Earth, are only made by living things. For decades, Hollywood has imagined what first contact with alien life might look like. But the real search for life has led scientists to a giant planet far outside our solar system. K2-18b is a giant ocean-covered planet about 120 light years away.
We have found signs of biosignature molecules, either DMS or DMDS or both of which are produced uniquely by life here on Earth.
The big find? 2 compounds in K2-18b's atmosphere that here on Earth come primarily from tiny microbes in our ocean. To be clear, scientists are not claiming aliens are out there. Not yet.
This is a monumental discovery. It is very important, but we also have to be extremely cautious. We also want to do more theoretical and observational studies to make sure that there is absolutely no other way we can make this molecule without life.
Scientists say this is especially encouraging because it shows we might be able to spot signs of life, even from light years away.
We are basically establishing here that we can detect that kind of signature, those kinds of planets and biosignatures in them.
Rhiannon Alley, ABC News, New York.
Really, really cool. I want to talk to you about just how far away this planet is. Again, they were saying over 100 light years, okay? What I researched on this, it said about 124 light years. And 1 light year is 5.88 trillion miles, okay? That's the distance to this planet labeled K2-18b. It's around a red dwarf, okay? So the sun, basically a red dwarf that it is there, but it's in that Goldilocks zone where it may be hospitable for life. So they were already watching this thing. So how far away is it? If 1 light year equals 5.88 trillion miles, this thing being 124 light years away, I did some quick math, 729.12 trillion miles away. Pretty good distance out there, but still so cool that we can see this. And again, as the scientists you just saw in that story were mentioning, this could be a game changer in our ability to spot signs of life. It was picking up signatures that we only know are produced by life forms as we know it in our system here. So something cool to think about. All right, let's come back to our weather, the weekend preview. Saturday, the high 85 here, partly sunny. It's going to be partly cloudy on Sunday, maybe a little more cloud cover. Low risk of rain this weekend. I don't think we're going to see it. If you're going up to D.C., it's going to be hot there. Richmond, Charlottesville, all very warm, upper 80s. We'll see temperatures cooler on Easter Sunday, upper 70s to near 80. We'll take a quick look at the European model. Again, dry as we go through Good Friday into Saturday. That surge of warmer air here in Hampton Roads. And then eventually you see some of that moisture kind of off to the north and out to the west, but it doesn't come into play here. High pressure still in control, holding off those showers. It looks like by late Monday night into Tuesday, we could see some wet weather. You see it approaching the western parts of the Commonwealth as we go later Monday night into Tuesday. We'll look for chances. Here's a quick look at our Easter Sunday travel forecast again for Boston, New York City, looking good. Cleveland looking better now, 53, 87. That has not changed in Orlando over the past few days. I've been coming back to this travel forecast for Sunday, and we'll keep you updated. Rain chances still across the central U.S., showers and some thunderstorms out west. Things looking pretty good for most of the western U.S. Still maybe a few showers, some unsettled weather up around Seattle. Here locally, sunshine, cool conditions. We've got the warm up coming, and then our next good rain chances here coming up Monday night into Tuesday. Plenty of sunshine with our Thompson Creek Window Company sky view. Absolutely beautiful right now. Temperatures are cool, though. Highs today are going to top out in the mid-60s, and that will be below that normal high of 71. So it is a cool day for sure. Again, across the region, plenty of sunshine this afternoon, mid-60s. As we head into the evening, it'll be mainly clear. More sunshine tomorrow. Temperatures warm up, though. We're going to get back into the upper 70s here in Hampton Roads, and then it gets warmer after that. Temperatures will range today from the low 60s near the coast to upper 60s inland. Make sure you've got your sunscreen and take your sunglasses with you as you're about your business outside this afternoon. Wonderful light jacket, maybe. I personally love temperatures in the 60s, so if you're comfortable with that, maybe a nice long sleeve shirt, but you don't need to layer up too much. These temperatures very comfortable and getting warmer over the coming days. Here's a quick look at the boating forecast. Again, no advisories or warnings up for the water. The wind's actually easing as we go later today. Seas running 2 feet, bay waves about 1 to 2 feet. The allergy report, different story. It is still extreme. That tree pollen, that continues to be a big issue. Here's the 7-day forecast. We're going to see temperatures trending up, as I mentioned, mid-80s on Saturday, 80 on Sunday, and then back closer to average as we get into the middle part of the week. Want to remind everybody you can always get the forecast on the go anytime you need it by downloading the 13 News Now app. Scan that QR code. You'll have access to our radars, our forecast updates, and any special forecast coverage that we have. All right, hopefully you enjoyed this edition of the Weather Desk. Again, a lot of Hurricane Center talk, but what a great interview we had with the gentleman down there from NHC. And of course, talking some possible signs of life and other planets. Pretty exciting. You never know what you're going to find, but I can tell you, you're always going to get today's top weather headlines when you tune in to the Weather Desk. Have a great day.